Hi. So in this video, we are just going to have a close scrutiny of a transcript, a conversation between a two and a half year old boy called Tom, who's 2 years, 7 months old, and his mum, and they're playing with a farm themed jigsaw. So in your booklet, this is on page 29. And what we're all about here is identifying CDS features, if there are any, child-directed speech features in the mother, and looking to see what evidence there is of other kinds of theories that we've covered so far on children's language development. So behaviorism, nativism, cognitive theory, structuralism, all of those things. Okay, so mother starts off, well, before we look at the actual detail of each individual word and sentence, just stand back a little bit and look at it in terms of the turn-taking devices going on here, because we've got mother and Tom who have roughly an equal mean length utterance. Now remember, a mean length utterance means the average number of words that you say per turn. This is not a conversation that's completely dominated in terms of words by the mother. And therefore, it's quite interesting in terms of discourse. And somebody who is interested in CDS would say, look at how the mother here is setting up the interaction so that they're giving the child enough time to pause and to answer questions. Talking of questions, look at the mother's first utterance there. How many chickens are there? So key CDS feature, the use of interrogative structures. Notice also that the mother is using completely standard English there. It was Noam Chomsky in his nativist model who was arguing that when adults speak, they use such fragmentary language. He argued that this poverty of stimulus would make it almost impossible for a child to learn any semblance of kind of standard English. But this data, or at least the beginning of the data, rather undermines what he's arguing there, because the mother is using perfectly formed standard English. So the mother says, how many chickens are there? And Tom has a 2-second pause and says, there's many chickens. So there's maybe some repetition going on there. You could argue from a behaviorist point of view that you've got copying going on, that Tom here is imitating the mother. Mother has used the noun phrase many chickens, so that's why Tom here is saying many chickens. We notice also there's a slightly different form of the primary auxiliary verb that's being used by Tom. Whilst the mother has said how many chickens are there, Tom here is using a different form of the primary auxiliary verb to be. He's saying there's many chickens. So he's using a different form, and therefore he's not just imitating his mother. Having said all of that, what's noticeable here is this is pretty close to standard English, what Tom is doing. So at this stage, if we've only got this as evidence, we might argue that he's going beyond the telegraphic stage, even though he's only 2.5 years old. So Tom embarks upon his counting. He goes 1, 2, 3. We've got this pause, which is what the brackets is with the full stop in each one. That's a pause. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so on the face of it, Tom seems to be counting pretty successfully. That seems to be a skill that this 2.5-year-old is able to pick up. But look at the mother's response there. Mother goes, shall I count them now? Now, to us as adults, looking at this pragmatically, we can see here that Tom hasn't counted these properly. But the mother is not wading in there and saying, no, listen to me count. She's saying, shall I count them now? So there is a kind of pragmatic message that's coming through in the mother there. And it's also interesting in terms of behaviorism, because Skinner is arguing that children learn through negative reinforcement. Well, here, the mother isn't quite negatively reinforcing. She's not actually contradicting Tom. She's just rather pragmatically rephrasing it in a different way. Okay, but the mother then goes into it's phrased as a question. It's one of these statements of intent, really, but it sounds like she's asking permission. Shall I count them now? So notice the use of the epistemic modal auxiliary verb shall, which shows that she's being very polite. And we know that politeness features are very often seen as important in child-directed speech. Tom says, yeah, and just another line down, he says, yep, as well. So he's got alternate ways of affirming a statement. Mother goes back into the old counting routine, so she counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We notice again the pauses between each number, and pausing is a feature of CDS. And then mother says, and we saw chickens this morning, didn't we? So cognitively, that's more of a kind of stretch for the child because we're moving into more abstract realms of thought here. It's asking the child to remember something in the past time. So it's no longer deictical. And again, she's using perfect standard English, and she's using not an adjacency pair, but a tag question. She's using a tag question. So that's very much a feature of CDS, keeping the dialogue interactive and ensuring that the child makes some kind of response. So Bruner and Vygotsky would say, well, this is the scaffolding that's going on here. The use of the tag question is a way of scaffolding in order to develop the child's response. Tom's answer is quite interesting. He says, we did. Again, perhaps, I mean, Skinner would argue, well, he's just copying. He's copying the mother's use on the tag question of didn't we? And that's why he's saying we did. He could be doing that. It's quite an interesting response. Instead of just saying yes, he says we did. And then we've got the mother's continuation of the explanation about where they saw the chickens. At Pascal's house, she's got some pet chickens. So repetition, we know that repetition is a big feature of CDS. That's what the mother seems to be doing. What are we to make of Tom's penultimate line here where he says has, have, has, she? It's very deictical, it's context dependent, and without actually seeing the participants here, it's difficult to work out exactly what Tom is doing. Is he wrestling with whether to say has or have, or is something else going on? We just don't know. Then he says, and then we have a pause when he thinks about it, stroke one chicken. Interesting use of the material verb stroke being used, so that's pretty impressive in a 2.5-year-old. We notice that Tom here uses he doesn't use the past tense inflection on the end of the material verb, so he says stroke instead of stroked. Mother hears that and does a recast because she goes, you did, didn't you? Another tag question, you stroked it. So she provides the model there in showing this is what a past tense inflection would look like on the verb. All in all, we've got quite an array of child-directed speech features here, but also quite a bit of evidence that supports other kind of CLD theories. Okay, thanks very much for that. We'll come out of there.